toward the back of the file. He spent over an hour peering at the data and eventually was able to tease out some recognizable information. Whoever made this file knew a lot about him. He was irritated to find his height was wrong. It wasn't labeled height, it was just the number, but it was unmistakable. 5 feet, 11 inches. It was wrong in that while that might be how tall Martin was if you went to the trouble to measure him, he'd been putting 6 feet 2 inches on every form he'd filled out since high school. He edited the number and hit save. He spent a few moments looking around at various numbers in the file, then got up to go to the bathroom. Martin stretched his arms, stood up quickly, and felt a terrible discomfort in his groin. It was like someone had grabbed the waistband of his jeans and pulled upward. These were his favorite jeans. They'd always been a little tight. He liked pants that constantly reminded you that you were wearing pants. But they never caused him anything like this sort of discomfort. He looked down at his waist. His belt was right where it usually sat, but the inseam of the jeans was definitely riding higher than usual. Also, now that he looked, the hems were slightly higher on his ankles than he'd remembered. Weird, he thought as he pulled his pants down a bit and walked into the bathroom. While absent-mindedly taking a leak, he glanced over at the mirrored front of the medicine cabinet. He saw dust building up on top of the medicine cabinet and thought that he should really clean up there. He didn't dust that spot often because he couldn't see up there. He stared at the dust, letting that thought sink in until he realized his aim had drifted and he was urinating on the wall. The whole time he was cleaning the wall behind the toilet, he was laughing at himself. When he was a kid, occasionally he'd have to leave the house at night to fetch something from the car for his parents. He would always think about how weird it would be if some horrible monster was chasing him, and by the time he returned to the safety of the house, he would be in a dead sprint with his stomach tied in knots. Then he would laugh, because it was ridiculous to think that a monster would be chasing him in his front yard on a well-lit street in the suburbs. This, he knew, was no different. His pants rode up. It probably meant he was gaining weight. Not a good thing, but nothing to freak out about. And the medicine cabinet had probably settled a bit, or one of its support screws had torn free of the drywall, or maybe he was imagining the whole thing. Sitting around all night in a dark apartment with the TV and computer screens providing all the ambient light is bound to affect your perception after a while. When the wall was as clean as it was going to get, he turned his attention to the medicine cabinet. It was still fastened firmly to the wall and didn't appear to have moved. He could still see the dust-covered top, and furthermore, he was pretty sure he had always been able to look himself in the eye when he looked at the cabinet's mirrored front. He remembered the mirror cutting him off about halfway through his eyebrows. He was looking in the mirror now, and all he could see was his nose. He looked at his feet again to reassure himself that he was barefoot. Then he just stood there, being confused. Finally, Martin left the bathroom. He turned on every light in the apartment. He walked out to the living room, kitchen, dining room of the apartment. It was all one space, but you could tell the kitchen was a different room because there were appliances in it. You could recognize the dining room because there was a cheap chandelier hanging from the ceiling over the spot where the architect clearly wanted Martin to put a table and chairs. Instead, the chandelier hung at eye level in empty space behind Martin's desk chair. Martin scanned the room and told himself that he'd always been able to see the top of the refrigerator, and that he was only noticing it now because it was so dusty. Enough of this, Martin thought. He went to the bedroom closet to dig through his toolbox. When he moved out of his parents' house, his Uncle Ray had volunteered to drive the rental truck. While watching Martin and his friends carrying Martin's belongings from his comfortable seat in the air-conditioned cab, Uncle Ray noticed that Martin owned no tools. Martin told him, "I've always lived with my dad, so I've never really needed tools." "While you're noticing things, have you noticed that you sitting there in the cab of the rental truck with the motor running and the air conditioning blasting is costing me a fortune in gas?" Uncle Ray said that he had noticed, and that it was fine, and didn't bother him. Later, Uncle Ray gave him a fairly well-stocked tool set as a housewarming gift. The tool set came in its own toolbox. Martin told him, "Thanks. Did you notice that the toolbox is pink and says her first tool kit in sparkly letters?" Uncle Ray said that he had noticed, and that this was also fine and didn't bother him. Good old Uncle